2006, the International Astronomical Union, the IAU, had a meeting where they redefined planet. And as a result, Pluto was seemingly demoted from planet to dwarf planet, and people lost their minds.
If you have a little model of the solar system at home, you can break off the outermost planet.
They want to name me Pluto? What kind of name is that?
Starting research for this video, I was not super interested in the status of Pluto. This definition sucks, right? I was more interested in the public response because I remember this being a huge deal. Like, for months, the science section of any news would be an astronomer talking about Pluto and then like some dude interviewing little kids and really leading them to have feelings. Like just begging them to cry on air.
Now, Nathan, tell me, what do you think of Pluto being downgraded?
I think it should not be downgraded because I like the planet a lot. And
Scott, why do you hate Pluto? I like Pluto. Daddy, don't you like Pluto?
well, I don't really know, but I think it's that one right there.
No, sweetie, it's not. No, it's back behind you. It's even smaller than that one, which is actually why they're downgrading it, because it's so small.
You would see local governments being like, in Arizona, Pluto's a planet.
The State House of Representatives voted that Pluto really is a planet whenever it passes over the state of New Mexico.
You would see people like Neil deGrasse Tyson going on talk shows and being like, Pluto had it coming.
Pluto had it coming from the beginning. It was never really belong. Pluto's orbit crosses that of another planet. That's no kind of behavior for a planet.
You would see people wheeling out the 90-year-old widow of the discoverer of Pluto, which happened in 1930, and having her be very upset and being like, it should still be a planet, which is wild. For years, every time you wanted to have a smart character on TV, you would have them reference Pluto. And the fact that they're smart and they remember astronomy and they know Pluto's not a planet.
Of course Pluto's a planet, son. I learned that in the 3rd grade.
Well, yeah, but I'm quite familiar with Dr. Tyson. He's responsible for the demotion of Pluto from planetary status. I liked Pluto.
You heard about Pluto? It's messed up.
There were many, many lessons. Like, you can go on YouTube and watch tons of videos of like 7th graders projects where they debate whether or not Pluto is a planet.
So they demoted Pluto in 2006.
So therefore it is not a planet anymore. Well, Pluto has been a planet for 76 years.
And I think it's kind of awesome, and it's rare. How often is the public talking about a science topic and debating the merits of a scientific decision and just openly and excitedly discussing it and having an opinion and just enjoying science? I think Pluto is the last time that will ever happen, and that's why it's so interesting. Let's get into it. People cooler than me are advocating for the numbered list format, so I'm gonna give it a go. Why people freaked out about Pluto and why it will never happen again. A numbered list.
They want to name me Pluto? What kind of name is that?
First, it was 2006. I hope I don't sound really old for the next few minutes.
They want to name me Pluto? What kind of name is that?
Think about how you get your science news right now, right? You grab your phone in the morning, you check Twitter or Facebook or whatever you check, and the top stories are right there. In 2006, people definitely had the internet, but they did not have smartphones. And I guess I was a child, but I don't remember in 2006 people waking up. Like, we didn't have iPads, we didn't have iPhones. Like, you wouldn't just go dial up your computer in the morning. That wasn't a thing people did. So if something giant happened in the news, you would hear about it when you got off the bus and you walked up the hallway to where your friends were sitting, and they were like, did you hear about blah, blah? And in August of 2006, it was, did you hear about Pluto? that's messed up. I'm not saying it's better now or worse now or whatever, but in 2006, that is how information was exchanged. If you worked in an office in 2006, you would have heard about Pluto when you walked in, and you would have had a conversation with a human. That's not really how it happens anymore. If you see something interesting about science, you're gonna watch like the TikTok from the scientist about it. Maybe you follow like some blogs or something. It's not really a conversational like exchange of information anymore. It's just not how it's done. If someone walked up to you today and was like, did you hear about Pluto? You would just pull out your phone and be like, what happened? And you would just read the news about it. You wouldn't have a conversation. I don't think it will ever happen again where the primary mode of exchanging information about a piece of scientific information is going to be conversation with peers. But it was in 2006. It spread. Everyone was talking about it. I was really busy in 2006, but even in like guild chat, people would be like, did you hear about Pluto? Did you hear what happened with Pluto? What do you think about Pluto? And people would debate and they would state their opinions. It was 2006.
They want to name me Pluto? What kind of name is that?
The second reason people freaked out about Pluto and it will never happen again is because science is hard. When a scientist does like a research study and they write it up and it goes through peer review and they produce this lovely, wonderful 64-page journal article, the only people that are ever going to read that are like 10 of their colleagues, right? I am a physicist. If I pulled out some sort of like sociology paper and just tried to read it, I wouldn't understand what was going on. I would have to look up every word I didn't understand. I would have to read all the cited papers to try and understand the references they're making. And like maybe I would get an idea for what it was after like dedicating 10 hours to this process, but like I wouldn't really know if I understood it unless I went and talked to a sociologist and was like, is this what's happening, you know? And I just, the way our society is built, even if you are the most interested person in the world in like black hole dynamics and you download the latest paper, when do you have the time to get up to date on astrophysics in order to read that paper? Like imagine you're a normal person and you get up at 6 and you give the kids breakfast and they're to school at 8:30 and you go to work and you leave at 4:30. You pick the kids up, you spend 2 hours with them and they're off to bed and you have 2 hours. You have 2 hours left in your day. Are you gonna spend the next month of your 2 hours trying to read a paper? Or are you gonna watch The Sopranos? Or if you're me, are you gonna watch that girl do pottery and do the mystery molds and then paint them? Because that's what I'm gonna do. Like, I'm not gonna learn a new field with my 2 hours. It's just the way our society is built, science is not in our reach unless that's our job. But not with Pluto, right? Pluto was easy. Pluto was 3 things. Pluto was someone coming up to you and say, did you hear about Pluto? That's messed up. And then you say, no, what? And they're like, well, Pluto's not a planet. They said a planet has to go around the sun, it has to be round, and it has to clear its orbit. Pluto doesn't clear its orbit, so Pluto's not a planet. I explained it to you in 40 seconds. If you can read this plot and you know what the sun is and you know what the planets are and you know that those circles are orbits, you understand the IAU's decision and you can make an opinion. You can argue. You can have a valid opinion because you understand the problem, because the problem is simple. When will we ever have a simple problem? Never again.
They want to name me Pluto? What kind of name is that?
So science is hard, but also science is communicated poorly. The way new, exciting, like leading edge scientific research reaches the public is kind of like a game of telephone, right? Like someone does some interesting analysis, they collect some interesting data, they write up a paper, the paper goes through peer review, and then it's published. And that's like 3 to 27 years, right? And then the scientist is like, this is pretty good. This is pretty good. I'm gonna ask the press release office of my organization to write something up. So a scientific journalist talks to the scientist, and the scientific journalist is probably like, they probably have like a bachelor's degree in science, and like if the scientist is explaining it to them, they can kind of get an idea for what's going on. And together they come up with like a nice little like 5th grade explanation in 2 paragraphs with a single plot. And if you follow like universities or research organizations like on Twitter, or I don't know what people are going to do now, you can read those press releases and be like, neat. But most people don't do that. What happens next is like websites like MSNBC and the Daily Mail and CNN and sciencemagazine.com or whatever will have people who watch these organizations for press releases. They will then read the 2 paragraphs in the picture and write up their own 5th grade explanation, right? Oftentimes this second version is done without any communication with the original scientist. So you can see how things could be misconstrued in all those jumps. But also capitalism is a problem because the Daily Mail, the MSNBCs, the CNNs, they want you to click on this. So it doesn't matter what the result of the study was or what the scientist thinks the study was about. The headline is going to say something like, "Scientist cures cancer." Scientists say that our black hole is going to eat the Earth. You know how like every single month you'll see an article that's like super moon, super red moon, super biggest moon in the next 86 years, and it's like, how can there be something exciting about the full moon every single month? It's because there's not. They're just hoping you're interested enough in science to click the link. It doesn't matter what it says. You clicked it, you saw the ads. Capitalism, baby. I think the fact that science is hard, but people still click the links even though it's communicated to them so poorly is kind of nice. It means people really care about science. Let me give you another example. Have you ever looked at like the comments of like an article that's like, people who eat less red meat live longer or something? The top comment will always be something like, well, correlation doesn't equal causation. And it's just like, it's like a thing that's easy to explain, so the public latches onto it, but they don't really understand it, right? So like somewhere, someone to that person was like, look at this plot of ice cream sales. Look at this plot of drownings. See how this data is highly correlated? The peaks match the peaks, the valleys match the valleys. But do you think ice cream causes drowning deaths? No, that's because correlation doesn't equal causation, right? That's easy to explain. So people like latch onto that. And every time they see an article about a science result that they don't like, they'll just be like, correlation doesn't equal causation. And it doesn't go beyond that, right? They don't realize that like scientists also know that phrase. They don't realize that if they read the actual scientific article that was submitted for peer review to a journal, they would find paragraphs upon paragraphs and plots upon plots where they discuss correlation and causation and how they picked their sample to ensure that they avoid correlated stuff. Like, people want to know science, but like they're only given these easy things and they can't follow through to get more advanced stuff. I think, you know, those little things that pop up to check to see if you're a robot and they're like, click all the boats. If you type correlation does not equal causation, it should like pop up and ask you to define what a p-value is, because I don't think they know. People who type that, they're smart, they're engaged, they want to know science, but science is just communicated so poorly. What I'm trying to say here is we live in a world where science is out of most people's reach, but people love science. And because of capitalism, it's just communicated to us in such a way to make us angry and upset and to purposefully like misunderstand everything. But in 2006, for one shining moment, everyone could understand the Pluto problem and everyone could discuss it And it was kind of beautiful. I think there's one more reason that people freaked out about Pluto and it will never happen again. And that's because it was 2006.
They want to name me Pluto? What kind of name is that?
I was a child, and as I said, I was really busy in 2006, but I remember it being kind of a thing in 2006 to like fake argue things. So like maybe it was a joke. Did people freak out about Pluto because they thought it was funny? Like, I remember like you would drive to school because you're a child in 2006, right? And like the radio DJ would be like, well, I think that a taco is a sandwich. And then the other DJ would be like, Steve, you're crazy, a taco's not a sandwich. And like, then you would go to school and you would be like, do you think a taco is a sandwich? Because like you pile the ingredients on. And then someone would be like, soft shell taco or hard shell taco. But now, that's not really how it works, right? Like you just see that play out on TikTok with people way funnier than you and your friends and you laugh about it, but you don't bring it up later, right? But in 2006, you hear about Pluto, you go talk about it with your friends and you make jokes and like maybe you have teams. Like wasn't that a thing in 2006? Like Alliance versus Horde, red versus blue. It was a thing. It's a really vulnerable moment for me, but like I don't really understand a lot of jokes. My colleagues often make the joke that it's hard to exit the software Vim. Like my colleagues, professional computational physicists who sit at computers all day and write programs, say that it's hard to exit Vim, and then they all laugh. And I'm just like, :Q, :WQ, :Q exclamation point. Like, why is it funny? You're a professional researcher. Like, you can just Google how to exit Vim. Someone in the comments below explain why it's funny to say it's hard to exit Vim. But maybe I'm really showing my ass here, and it's hilarious to pretend that you have really strong feelings about Pluto.
They want to name me Pluto? What kind of name is that?
So science is hard, but people like science, but it's communicated to us through capitalism. It's designed to make us angry and purposefully misconstrue things to make us buy things or click on things, and we want science and we can't get it anymore. But for one brief shining moment in 2006, there was something simple and elegant and small and understandable, the Pluto problem, and third graders could talk about it. Old people could talk about it. We could all make jokes and make arguments and talk about our nostalgia for third grade science. And that's never gonna happen again. The Pluto problem was this beautiful little moment in time, and I love that. I mentioned that I didn't really have an opinion on Pluto. I notice people still talking about Pluto a lot. Like if you Google Pluto planet ? Ooh, if you Google on YouTube, if you search on YouTube Pluto planet ? You will see 10 videos that came out in like the last 2 months where people talk about, is Pluto a planet? Why isn't Pluto a planet anymore? And I noticed something, like people who want Pluto to be a planet, they've kind of dropped off, right? In 2006, it was like half the people, and they were arguing for nostalgia, saying like, well, so what? We found other massive icy bodies, whatever. Pluto can still be a planet, and the other ones can be something else. I saw people arguing for tradition and just saying like, I learned this in third grade. I am not learning it again. Pluto is a planet. And then most people, probably the category I would have fallen into in 2006, were like, I'm not an astronomer. They're professionals. I trust what they're saying. I guess Pluto's not a planet, right? So now, if you search on YouTube videos that are like Pluto planet ? You'll see a bunch, and they'll all be explaining why Pluto's not a planet anymore. And they kind of just repeat the three things, and they say, see, Pluto doesn't sweep out its orbit. It's not a planet. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Am I mocking myself?
Cleared pretty much everything else out of its orbital path. The last one is where Pluto falls short. Pluto is only 0.07 times the mass of everything else in its orbit. Earth, just to give you some sense of perspective, is 1.7 million times the mass of every.
Then I started looking at this definition and I started reading. I read a really amazing article that's like 70 pages long, and I'm sorry, but it's really readable, about like the history of the planet and how we have described planets just like as humans in popular culture, in astrology, since we could see planets with telescopes. I'm gonna link it. It's amazing. Read it if you have time and that's what you want to spend your 2 hours on. I watched lots and lots of these videos and they're all identical. They all just say the three things and say, see, Pluto's not a planet. I read a book called The Pluto Killer by the guy who claims responsibility. I really like the font on the front cover. And I started thinking more about this definition. And I've seen other astronomers, especially in 2006, writing blog posts where they're like, this definition sucks, right? This is just bad. And so in the spirit of 2006, where ranting became really popular and like rant humor became really popular, you know, like you rant on the news.
Today I want to ask you about Otter Tail.
No, remember, we took that to a sell. We had a really great buy, and then we decided sell.
Or you rant about video games.
This game is horrible. What are those guys doing with that window anyway? And why are those giant bees always coming out? Give me a break.
You rant about classical music and
when I find myself in times of trouble, Parker Bell's always following me. I'll see you in hell, Parker Bell.
It's funny because you're talking fast. Very 2006. I will deliver rapid fire why this definition is stupid and why Pluto is a planet.
They want to name me Pluto? What kind of name is that?
Wanted to get a real 2006 angle going. So I'm just gonna look at this definition and let's just rapid fire go through problems with it. I'm sure everyone else has already talked about these problems, but like I need to say it. First of all, why in 2006 are we defining a planet based on its orbit around the sun? Like in 2006 we have like 500 exoplanets. We know that most stars are gonna have planets. Like, why are we defining a planet in 2006 based on the sun? That makes like no sense. It makes no sense. Like, what about exoplanets? Are exoplanets not planets? Does every solar system have this weird list of rules to make what planets are in that solar system? Because we can't even observe that yet. Like, what about the exoplanets? Secondly, on orbit around the sun. What is an orbit around the sun? Because I did a PhD in nonlinear dynamics, and I would often watch solar system physicists talk about how when you did simulations of the solar system's not stable. Like, chaos is very important. The little random seed you initialize to like give the 9th digit of position and velocity to each of the planets would affect the outcome. And a certain percentage of the time, Mercury just gets kicked out of the solar system. It just flies away. So is Mercury on an orbit around the sun? What if it's on one of these flies away orbits? When does Mercury cease to be a planet? Like, at what step in its evolution? Is it just not, I guess, an exoplanet? Did you even define rogue planets? No, because you ignored all the exoplanets. Is Mercury a planet under this definition? Is it? What about Mercury? I don't think defining a planet should depend on the time step. Like, Mercury is a planet right now, but in 1.5 billion years it's not because it's been kicked out. That doesn't make sense. The second thing is that planets have to be round, and I think this is great. Like a little compliment sandwich, yeah, massive enough to be spherical is a good one. Good job, guys. Gold star, because you're defining a planet on an intrinsic property. It's mass. It doesn't matter what time step it is. It doesn't matter where it's in the solar system. If it's massive enough to be round, it's a planet. Bingo. Speaking of where it's in the solar system. This last one is obviously the big one. It's got to clear its orbit. Did you want to define what that meant? No? Okay. It almost seems like they wrote this specifically to kick Pluto out, which is so odd. Like, why? What they mean by this is that Pluto is not massive enough to like collect all the minor masses surrounding it. And so like it hasn't cleared its orbit of junk, so it's not a planet. And all these YouTube videos actually, they'll say something like, the mass of the Earth is 1.7 million times all the stuff on its orbit, and the mass of Pluto is only 0.7 times all the stuff on its orbit. And it's like, okay, so you're telling me if Pluto is where Mercury was, it would be a planet. But since Pluto's out there with lots of crap, it's not a planet. Why should it matter where the object is, if it's a planet or not? It's round enough to be spherical. It should be a planet. I'm still annoyed by sweep out its orbit. Like you don't even define that. Like what percentage, what value, like give me some quantitative stuff here. You know how Pluto and Neptune's orbits kind of overlapped? In the ultimate mic drop moment, and I don't remember this guy's name, he was responsible for the New Horizons mission, which actually launched a few months before they demoted Pluto. He was like, well, if you have to sweep out your orbit to be a planet, it looks like Neptune's not a planet, because if Neptune had swept out its orbit, Pluto wouldn't be there. But let's go on. So at the same meeting, they also define a dwarf planet. So a dwarf planet, they're like orbit around the sun, massive enough to be spherical, it doesn't have to sweep out its orbit, and it can't be a moon. And there's a couple things I have to say about this. First of all, I noticed you put in moons because, like, honestly, like the moon is a planet, right? Like it's massive enough. It's a big boy. It's circular, like Ganymede, Io, Titan, all those moons around the giant planets. They're circular. If they were on their own orbits around the sun, they would be planets. Why are you kicking them out? Why aren't they planets? You know, in like the 1700s, they called the moon a planet because it is a planet, right? But dwarf planet also really bothers me. What does the word dwarf evoke to you, right? It's like small in stature, right? So they're saying Pluto is so small, it's not a planet, it's a dwarf planet. It's like a subclass of planets. And it's like, okay, fine, Pluto's a planet. It's a type of planet called a dwarf planet. Fine, we're like classifying things, whatever. But if you're gonna call it a dwarf planet, you're gonna make a statement about its size. I need you to give me quantitative numbers. What is the definitive mass density radius line between planet and dwarf planet? And why is it Pluto? Tell me, Mercury is really small. Is Mercury a dwarf planet? What's the difference? There's like 4,000 kilometers in radius between them. Where's the cutoff? What kind of definition doesn't have a cutoff? And that's not why you made Pluto a dwarf planet. I mean, I don't think it has anything to do with its mass. It has to do with the fact that it didn't sweep out its orbit. And sure, if Pluto was the size of Jupiter, all of those icy bodies would have been sucked up into it. But you're not really defining Pluto by its mass. You're defining it by its surroundings. It's not an intrinsic property. So why are you calling it a dwarf planet when you mean like icy planet? When you mean like crowded planet? What does dwarf have to do with it? If you're gonna call it dwarf because it's small, what size makes it not a planet? This is just a bad definition. It's bad. It's bad, bad, bad. It's bad, 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 bad. Anyway, here's my definition. Like, you know how they define stars, like generally. It's like you're massive enough to do fusion, you're a star. So here's my definition. You're massive enough to be around your planet. You gain mass, you do fusion, you're a star. That's it. It doesn't matter where you are in the solar system or where you are in the galaxy. It doesn't matter if you have moons, if you are a moon, if you're around your planet. That's it. That's the only definition that makes sense, right? And I mean, we could classify things further. Like you could say terrestrial planets and gas giant planets and icy planets. You could call moons secondary planets, like to describe their orbits, but planets should describe intrinsic properties. And the only one we're looking at right now is mass. And if you have enough mass to be around your planet, and that's the end. K-Fix, bye.
They want to name me Pluto? What kind of name is that?
Worry people are gonna think I'm more invested in this than I actually am. But like that's 2006 for you. Sarcasm, acting really angry and upset about things, but like not really having an opinion. Maybe it was a joke.